The Sickness Unto Death is a very challenging book, obviously. On different levels is it challenging. That is, it's a challenging read, and I hope that you've read it. I really do. And I hope that if you've read it, that looking at these videos, if you're looking at these videos, has helped you read it with more profit. So it's a difficult book in that respect. It's a challenging book in that respect. But once we begin to understand it, it's even more challenging. The more religious we are, and definitely the more Christian we are, the more challenging it is. I think that reading this book, if you're a Christian, is a much more dicey proposition than if you're reading it as a non-Christian, because the Christian is challenged by this book, and it's meant to be a challenge. Kierkegaard's Christianity is not everyone's Christianity, that's for sure. But there's certain challenges here, and I'm thinking of let's call them the roadblocks to faith, or the roadblocks to getting out of despair, or the roadblocks to getting out of sin that Kierkegaard suggests there are. I mean, we saw in the last talk, perhaps one of those roadblocks is that faith requires us to lose our minds so as to win God. But the first step is to voluntarily, of course, lose your mind. That is a definite roadblock. That is an obstacle to doing something, to having faith. And who would want to? Why would you want to voluntarily lose your mind? The possibility of offense that's described, the day laborer and the emperor story. That is that our true situation as selves, being in the presence of a God who loves us, who wants to heal us, who is begging us to accept His love, that our discomfort with that, it's all too much, I can't do it, this couldn't be right, because I'm just little old me, and God, why would God be doing all this for me? The possibility of offense is another roadblock. But if we look back on the part one, the progression and deepening of despair, I think we see another roadblock, a distinct roadblock. And we can go all the way back to his characterization of us as free beings. Maybe it's because we're free that these kind of conflicts with God are inevitable. Remember how he describes metaphorically our freedom in the beginning of the book. He says on page 46 in the first full paragraph, "Where then does despair come from? From the relation in which the synthesis relates to itself," which is saying, from self-consciousness, from the fact that God, who made man this relation, as it were, lets go of it. This kind of language will be taken up next week with Sartre, this notion of abandonment. There is a very real sense, I think, in Kierkegaard, in which part of the human situation is realizing that we have been abandoned by God. We have been let go by God. And that was necessary in order for us to be free. If God had not let go of us, if He had created us like everything else in the universe and kept a hold on us, then we would not have the capacity for free will. We would not be selves in the sense in which we are selves, because we wouldn't be self-conscious, we wouldn't be free. The roadblock is right there, and I think that is the very fact that we're free sets up obstacles. But I think there's also a kind of, I dare to say it, a kind of resentment against God for letting us go. And that resentment reaches its highest peak of intensity at the end of part one, in this description of the despair of defiance, the despair, the self that in despair wants to be itself, in flagrant opposition or disobedience to God, as if we really had a chip on our shoulder about God. And if one looks at those sections, there is a lot of evidence that if we do have a chip on our shoulder, ultimately that holding on to that chip is sin, no doubt. But the chip is there for a reason. because what he's describing in those pages, the last part of part 1, is human suffering, again. Human suffering and very bad things happening to us, and us doing very bad things. And our treasuring of the suffering that results from those things, where, as he says, sometimes something bad doesn't just happen to us, it becomes part of us. As I said before, it's an existential thing. It becomes part of our very being. We internalize it. And that God who's right there and begging us to accept his love does require that we let go of that suffering. In order to be the selves that we really are, we have to let go of those things which, at the point of view of the sufferer, those are the things that make you what you are, and to ask you to let go of them is to ask you to become nothing, again, from the point of view of the person, the self at that stage. Again, in retrospect, it will be seen as not giving up yourself, but what you need to do to become your true self. But that, again, that doesn't appear to be the situation from the point of view of the despair. No, the despair is the error that has become conscious of itself and that refuses to be erased. And the erasing would be accepting God's love and having faith. From the point of view of the despair, that's like destroying the evidence of all the incredibly horrible things that have happened as a result of being a free, self-conscious being. So, to my mind, that's the biggest, just personally speaking, that's the most convincing case for the obstacle to faith, is our natural reluctance to negate ourselves, seemingly, from that position, and to sort of accept God's love is not so easy in those situations, because it is asking us, again, to wipe out everything that makes us who we are, and to really, So, where are we at the end of this book? We realize that as selves, we are not things. We are dialectical beings, in the sense that we're constantly changing who we are. Who we are is being changed by our degree of consciousness of ourselves and what we are in relation to. That the self is not a thing, it's not an object that sort of sits there. It's not even Socratic in the sense that we could just sort of look at it and look at its parts and define it. The self is dynamic, it's a process, it's a relation which constantly is changing. And there is a suggestion of where it's going, but there is no definite idea of where it's going to end up. So next week we move into the 20th century, yay! And as we'll see, Jean-Paul Sartre's existentialism is a humanism is in some ways very similar to Kierkegaard. One could even say that he's ripped off Kierkegaard, but even though he's relying on him, he's definitely given it a very important twist, which may even help us understand Kierkegaard more.